Stanford University.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. I'm Akshay Kothari, and I'm here with my co-founder Ankit Gupta. And we started Pulse News, which is a news reading application for iPhone as well as iPad. And to start off, I should tell you that I'm really, really jealous of you guys. Not because I want to be in school again, but I and Ankit, both of us, applied to this course and did not get in. So you guys are really lucky to have this platform. We learned from textbooks and kind of just like looking at code online. But having a platform where you can learn step by step is great. And so you guys are really lucky and use that to full potential. To give you a little bit of background how Pulse started and where we've come from, we only started 5 months ago. It's a relatively new project, and we were at Stanford. We just graduated this summer. We were taking a class at the design school called Launchpad, and the whole point of the class was to launch your business. And Ankit and I both were avid news readers, and we increasingly saw that we were reading news on the go on mobile devices. And we thought the whole experience was kind of broken. And so what we wanted to do is allow you to aggregate news from all these different sources that you're reading every day, but provide you an experience that's very visual and that's very engaging. And take away things like telling you, oh, you have 1,000 items yet to be read. We want it to be very fun and very relaxing in some ways. And so we're going to give you a quick talk about the 10 hacks we did. We released the product from having an idea on paper all the way to actually releasing it on the App Store in 6 weeks. And we went to the top of the App Store. And we wanted to kind of share some of our hacks we did along the way. Some of these hacks apply if you wanted to really release it in 6 weeks, so take it with a grain of salt. But this is maybe useful for you in terms of thinking about how, if you're building out your project, how do you take it to the next level and release it? And so to start off, I'm going to pass it on to Ankit, and he'll talk about some of the initial technical hacks.
Hi, I'm Ankit. So first of all, I was a little nervous coming up here, but then I realized that students don't even, they doze off in class and don't even listen to people anyways. So I'm fine there. I can say whatever I want. So how many of you know Pulse or have seen Pulse or used it before? OK, cool. Cool. So for the rest of you, it's basically a very visual news reader that kind of aggregates all your sources, brings up the pretty pictures, and makes it a very clean interface to kind of read your news. And given that background, let me switch into the first hack, and you'll kind of see what it is. So this is Pulse. And we started this project in a class. And basically, we were students at Stanford, so we didn't have an office space. So we kind of realized, OK, we'll just use the awesome Palo Alto cafes and work there. So both me and Akshay used to go to these cafes, Cafe del Doge or Coupa Cafe, every day and just sit around and build the application. Now, the best part about that was that we were building this news reader for people who read a lot of news. And all of those people were around us in the cafes. I mean, we were completely surrounded by our users. And we hadn't thought of this earlier. But that turned out to be amazing because I would code something up really quickly, and Akshay could take it, prototype it, user test with all the users, get real feedback from people few feet away from us. And then we would iterate over the product really, really fast. And so that kind of helped us go from a very shitty, useless application to very, very sort of minimal feature-rich application that users really wanted to use, instead of something that we just create out of the box. So I think hack number one, if you don't have, even if you're in your room coding, I would say get out in the real world. Start with some simple paper prototypes and sort of up the resolution from there, so that you go from paper to keynote presentations to actually prototypes to show the users, get their real-time feedback. Something that worked out really well for us is if you give the user your application and then look over the shoulder to sort of just see how they're using it. You don't have to instruct them anything, but just sort of look at how they're using it, what gestures do they use, where do they get stuck. And that gives you a lot of insight into how you can improve your application. And the best part about coding on the iPhone is that you can test it wherever you are. So you can just walk around and test your application or show it to other people and use that to your advantage to keep testing the application so that it becomes better every day. So that's hack number 1 for you. Moving on, I think one of the really amazing things about coding on the iPhone is this awesome platform that gives you almost infinite interactions that you can implement, right? Like you can blow into the iPhone, you can shake it, touch it. It just opens up a lot of possibilities. And that is unique in itself. And so when you come up with an idea, you'll have this awesome interaction that you wanna code up, that you wanna make views for, right? But then what you don't realize is that you don't have to make everything from scratch. You can use existing Apple UIs or existing interfaces and see how you can sort of modify them to your advantage, to what you want to make. And to concretize this, let me give you an example. So if you go back to the previous slide, if you go back to the hack number 1, so this is the Pulse interface, right? And you see you have these like panning bars that you can sort of swipe across and see all the stories. And so I want to ask you how you would implement this. I found out that you guys learned table views recently, and so a hint is that these bars that you can kind of swipe across are implemented somehow like table views. But I wanna ask you how you would implement it. Anyone has any thoughts? All right, why would you implement this as a table view? Why would you use a table view? Yeah, go for it.
Because a lot of the things that table view gives you fit nicely with presentation stuff. It kind of like follows that format.
Yeah. So kind of you can use the same cells and they keep repeating itself and you can reuse them, right?
But you can access information from the database?
Yeah, exactly. So you can plug in your database and you can just plug in different data sources for each of these and kind of populate it very easily.
The table view optimizes the way that trees statements will be better performance.
As opposed to like a scroll view or something?
Right.
Yeah. So we kind of started off with a scroll view because it's horizontal. It kind of makes sense that you're scrolling things. But then eventually realized all of these awesome things about a table that we should use. And so just rotate it. So if you go back to the second slide, we just use the table view. So the app is essentially a huge table view with several of these table views inside it. And then these individual horizontal table views are just rotated from the vertical to the horizontal. And so it's essentially a table view inside a table view with a lot of custom cells that are being reused. And it took us about 2 weeks to get from scroll views to this kind of hierarchy of table views. But in the end, it made sense because you can use these custom Apple pieces and really combine them together to make custom views that you want. Right, moving on. So this hack is a little, there's a little disclaimer to it. It says, so basically, try not to use a server in your applications. And I mean, a lot of the applications that you would want to build would need a server, but a server brings a lot of vulnerability to the app. So it becomes a central point where things can fail. And you guys know, obviously, with the whole dig experiment, like things keep failing all the time. And so I think a very key point here is that try not to use a server whenever you can. And like obviously, you would want your app to be, have 1 million downloads in a week. And then people say that, oh yeah, having a scaling problem is a good problem to have. But not really, because you're the one who's going to solve that problem. And when you have to solve that problem, it becomes really hard. So I think a few tips that I want to give you in this hack is, think about using the client as your server. For us, we could have a server where you get all the feeds and you can kind of push these feeds from the server to the client. But we started off by saying, no, we don't want the vulnerability of the server. Why don't we use all the feed parsing and downloading on the client? And that worked out really well when we wanted to scale the product to a lot of users in a really short time. if you need a server for your application, like you want to store your data or store something on the cloud, think of how you can use existing infrastructure services, like maybe Flickr or Facebook to store photos, or YouTube to store videos, or maybe just store data in password-protected Google Docs and access the Google APIs. Use the Google APIs to access that data. So think of how you can use existing infrastructures that are built at scale to adapt to your app's needs. Still, if you do need a server, and maybe you need a web server for some APIs, I highly, highly recommend Google App Engine, because it's like right out of the box. You can use it. It works at scale, and it's really easy to implement. Now, the caveat is there are a few constraints that Google puts on you, but it's good to know about them. But when you start off, it's very easy to pick it up and put it in the app, at least for the first iteration. And just to keep it in the back of your mind, if you are using a server, there has to be a way in which you can silently degrade to a position where your server is failing. You should account for the possibility that the server will not be present, and so silently degrade your app so that it doesn't crash when you don't have a server. All right, hack number 4. I think this is more so when you're coding something up and you get these tasks that you want to perform, like maybe parse an XML file or download some data, it's very easy to just sit together and write everything by yourself, write everything from scratch. But I would highly recommend you to take a step back and Google or look at libraries or APIs that you can use to do the same things. And it sometimes is a good time investment if you spend that half an hour to an hour looking for the perfect library to do what you want. And it really helps you a lot to put a lot of things together and just ship the app really fast. And to give you a short list of some awesome libraries that I would recommend, we use a lot of the ASI HTTP request library as a parallel to NS-URL connection. So it's basically a library built on CF network that has a lot of good things like asynchronous downloads, SSL, you can do post, put. It's a really well-built library, which is, I think, far superior to Apple's NS-URL connection. Look at all the Google APIs. There are like hundreds of those, and they're really, really helpful. Like in our case, we wanted to do feed standardization. There's a lot of different types of RSS feeds, like Atom, XML, Atom 2.0 or whatever. And Google has an API that easily standardizes all those feeds to one format. And that worked out really well for us. We didn't have to make a separate parser for each format. So do look at all the Google APIs. 3.2.0 is an amazing iPhone API. I think a lot of you would know about it, made by Joe Hewitt at Facebook. And a bunch of these. You can get these slides and look at it later. Right. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Do put in analytics in your app from the get-go. We didn't put it in our first iteration. And when we actually did add it, we just realized we were missing out on so much good data that we can use to improve the app. It just opens, it tells you where the users get stuck, how many users come back to the app, or if there are any crashes or errors in your application that you don't know about. It's just it's quick and easy, like it takes 5 minutes to add it, but it opens up a lot of analytic possibilities that you wouldn't know of otherwise. So, cool. Now I'll switch over to Akshay to continue with the other hacks.
All right, so this is our most controversial hack, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think there are two things you have to do. So you have to use you to test your product and make sure it doesn't crash, and you have to make sure the usability is good. And I think one thing I really, really recommend is actually reading very clearly the human interface guidelines that Apple gives you, because that makes sure that your apps, follow all the good apps that are already out in the store. So that is a given. You have to do that. But when you're trying to release something in 4 to 6 weeks, this is one hack that we did that I would like to share, that we haven't shared this with anyone. What we did was every week or every 2 weeks, after the first 2 weeks, we made a product, right? So we were going to make a newsletter. But what we did was we said, OK, let's focus on 4 technology blogs and make this app. And so we made this app, Pulse, which was only 4 technology blogs. You couldn't add it. You couldn't do anything with it. That's all it was. And we submitted it to Apple. And so what we did was we actually, Apple gets a lot of flack in terms of like, oh, you have to wait a week. You have to get approval. But on the contrary, actually, you can use this amazing platform they're giving you to test and actually approve products to your advantage, right? And so if you're two people, you can't do every kind of testing. But what you can do is you can get into a conversation with Apple, right? So you have something that you've submitted to Apple in 2 weeks, and they're really good at it, right? So they get back to you in a week. And if they reject you, they actually give you great recommendations as to why they rejected you. And what that does is you get into a conversation with Apple where you can actually respond to them, and they're really, really good at kind of giving you feedback. Now the caveat with this is they can reject you and give you just one reason why they rejected it, right? And so truth be told, we were rejected 4 times before we went out 6 weeks later. But it's a good way to kind of get into a dialogue and actually understand the small subtleties that you need to make sure before an app gets approved. And we did it by trial and error, and I think you can reduce the number of rejections by just reading up what's online in some ways. The next hack is something that we did in class. So this was part of the Launchpad class that we took. And one of the exercises there was sell 10. And I think this was one of the most useful exercises in our class where even before you have released the product, the whole exercise was whatever the product is, whether it's an app, whether it's a hardware device, you need to sell 10 of these by next Friday. And this is a great exercise. Say if you're actually thinking about releasing an app, what can you do to sell 10? And it really allows you, it really focuses you to kind of think about what are you going to sell? What is your selling point? How can you get customers to agree to an app? How can you make something that's people are willing to pay for, right? We went from doing user testing in cafes where we realized people were saying, what kind of a crappy app is that, to going to a point where people say, oh, does this come preloaded with the iPad? And having that transition makes you realize, okay, we were thinking it's going to be a free app, but can we actually charge for it? And moving from people saying, I don't even want this app, to saying, oh, I'd be willing to pay $3 to $5 for this app is a great exercise to kind of improve your quality of the app, but also think about, there are over hundreds of thousands of apps out there. How are you going to rise above the noise? How are you going to really market yourself and be able to sell it? And so the class actually gave us a few mediums. And this is interesting. You would think I'm crazy, but even if you don't have an app, can you actually email someone and get a confirmation saying, I'm going to pay you $3 for this app? Can you do with that the same thing for 10 people? Or can you get verbal confirmation on the phone? What we did was we actually had ad hoc builds, which we sold. We said, okay, a friend of yours can give you $1, and I'm going to give you an ad hoc build of my application. The whole point of the exercise is to make sure you're getting to a stage where people want to pay for this app, and you're getting to a stage where you can actually sell the app and you can actually market it well. And this helps out a lot when you actually release. So I highly recommend doing this. This is, again, I think a counterintuitive. I think a lot of people think about, I've built my app, it's ready to go. Can I get on New York Times, or can I get on TechCrunch? Can I get some publicity? And I think we actually believed in the same thing, where our focus was like, what can we do to make it into TechCrunch and be up there? But our professors actually told us this, and it's actually really, really, I think we realize it now, that I think you're not going to get a sustainable app, or you're not going to actually make a lot of money just by thinking about that spike you're going to get. If you focus on the product and not on the media or not on the publicity, you're actually going to go much farther. And so thinking really hard about how can you optimize for that is really good. So what we did was we actually, even before we released, we made a small video of our experience of what Pulse was. And I recommend doing that just to get your word out there. So 2 weeks before we launched, we actually created a small video which explained what Pulse was, the interactions that we had. And instead of actually going to the tech blogs, we submitted it to some design blogs. So we took a different approach where we said, let's tap into that industry and look at how they perceive our design and what kind of things we can learn from them. And it started this small buzz in the design community where they were interested with this 2-axis interaction we had. And now when we released, we actually did not have anyone cover us. Like, we actually got none of the small blogs or the big blogs or newspapers covering us. And we had a very soft launch. And we wanted it that way because we had released something after working on it for 4 to 5 weeks. And what we wanted to do is actually get really close with those early adopters and really learn from them. And so what we did was like, we charged $4 when we first went out. And fortunately, we went to the top of the news without any publicity. But it was still a 3 to a 3.5 star app because there were a lot of bugs. There were a lot of things we needed to improve. And what we did was we did a 2-week quick iteration on that. We got all the bugs via email or via all our support stuff, and we improved. And actually launching it softly, making all those small fixes, and then launching big helped us a lot. So 2 weeks later, when we released our 1.1 version, we got TechCrunch to cover it. We got New York Times to cover it. We got a bunch of other guys to cover the app. Because at that stage, our app was stable. It was working well. It was a 4-star plus app. And that propelled us to #1 in the store, which we stayed for almost 2 weeks. And so think about, when you're actually working on your projects, depending on, I think both strategies work. One thing that worked for us was actually launching softly and then kind of building that and really engaging with your user base. I think I really recommend doing that. So this is a hunch. I'm not sure, don't quote me on this, but one of the things we did because we wanted some feedback was we wanted to get in touch with our users and really get feedback from them. And so what we did in our main app, the one that we released the first time, there was a heart button on the top right. As soon as the people click on that, it opens up an email right inside the app, which sends an email directly to us saying, please provide your feedback. And this is a hunch that I think if you provide your users a way to communicate with you, a way to kind of complain to you or appreciate your product or some level of support, it actually is a great thing, because if someone's not happy with with your product and has paid $2 or $4 for it, they can actually go to the App Store and leave you a bad review and actually crib about it on Twitter. But if you provide a platform where they can communicate with you directly, it's a very expensive proposition because you're going to get hundreds of emails. But it does two things. One is it actually gives you insights as to where the app is failing and where you need to improve. But the second thing it does is actually, if you respond to them and actually, tell them that you're working on it, we believe that actually they don't go back to the store complaining about it. Now, they might still do it, but I think it restricts that a little bit. So think about how can you make that support really, really easy for the user to come in.
Is there a way you can give the user their money back if they're not satisfied?
So the question was, can you give the money back if somebody's bought it and is not happy? So as developers, you don't have you don't want to do that. But I think if you search on the internet, I think there is a way where a customer can complain to Apple and get a refund on the product. But as developers, you're not required to give the money back.
Later, you just got on New York Times and TechCrunch. How did you do that?
So the question was, how did we get into New York Times and TechCrunch when we got that publicity? So there's a little story behind this. Where we first made this video for design blogs, we featured Pulse. We had a bunch of design blogs. And the blogs that we were focusing on picked us up because they were part of the video, right? So for example, Not Caught and Core 77 were part of the video, and they wanted to promote that because they were in the video also, and it's kind of a cool app. And so that worked really well for us. So we thought, okay, how do we flip this over? Let's make another video. Let's feature TechCrunch in it. Let's feature New York Times in it. And let's ping those guys and see if they bite also, right? And some of those sources actually, like TechCrunch actually bought it and featured us and gave us a really good review. With New York Times, it was a several back and forths and actually impressing them on the product before you really can sell them on a video, right? So I think at that stage, we had gotten to a point where the app was universally, at least majority of the users were liking it. We were getting good reviews. We were featured in the App Store. The momentum was with us, and the New York Times thing happened because I think we kind of got in at the right time at the right place. So do this. I don't know if email is the right way, but figure out a way where users can communicate with you directly. Actually getting an email like this, and if I respond even on my iPhone, I say, hey, it's great feedback. We're going to work on it. You'll be amazed how many consumers really, really value that. And just having that, a lot of these emails you can read. This is just from yesterday. Some of them are really good, and they'll tell you, there was one guy who said, you know, I figured it out. I know why Pulse works. You figured out the right square, which is providing me like the perfect mental stress so that I don't have to read the whole line on my iPad and go to the next line. Having it in a square-like fashion where I can quickly read a particular article and move ahead is great. And we didn't know that. And apparently this guy is a PhD, like doing all this neural stuff. And we were like, well, we never thought of that way. We stumbled upon the design because we iterated and, you know, people like this. But you suddenly get into conversations with users where you're like, you know, wow, this guy really knows his stuff and he's helping us in some ways. And sometimes you'll get emails where they, you know, this guy sends us screenshots or videos of how the app is crashing. And you couldn't ask for better kind of feedback than that. So do that.
Do you respond to every email? Most of them? Because I'd imagine you get a lot from the to-do list.
Yeah. So the question was, do you respond to every email? And I'll tell you, the first 4 weeks when we launched and till we got to number 1, I was spending 4 hours every day answering every email that we got. We've gotten to a stage where we can't do that anyway, so we're using tools like Get Satisfaction, and we have other people kind of looking at that. Because one of the things you realize as when you're kind of going from becoming an app to a company is that what's the best use of your time? How can you leverage the best? And I realized that, you know, I'm doing experience design. If I'm spending so much time on the support, it helps me in a way to get insights into how I can improve it, but maybe the leverage is a little small. So you have to figure out ways. But initially, I think you should think about how can you optimize for you know, a direct relation with the customer. Hack number 9. So this is another random thing that happened, right? So I did my master's in electrical engineering. Ankit did his master's in computer science. We have no design background. We were interested in design, and so we took a lot of courses at the design school at Stanford. But you know, we're not visual designers. And so first, after like a lot of like learning Photoshop and looking at how we can do it, we came up with this design on the left, which had this really retarded bezel frames and trying to pop it out, and it was pretty bad. I think I'm ashamed to show this to you right now. But what we did was there was a designer, there was a visual designer at the design school, and we said, can we sit down with you and you know, get some advice? And I think this is something that as computer scientists or as engineers, we take it very lightly, but it's something that you should think about. You know, visual design is something that you should think about. How can you improve it? And if you can't do it, just get someone who can do it. And so we sat with Andreas, who was our, you know, who we hired for a day, sat with him in a cafe for 12 hours and asked him to kind of give us small insights. And he just changed small things about, okay, you shouldn't have a white background because it's really, you know, glaring in the eyes. You should have some spacing between your text and the thing, you know, because it's kind of blurring that. And small changes made such a huge difference because that was our design. And when we changed it and updated to that design, all our feedback about having such a poor like visual design went away. And I think there's still a lot of room to improve that, but we spent just 12 hours with him, and that was very valuable. So some of the things, I think resources, you know, there are 2 things that are kind of cool. One is Color Brewer. So if you're actually looking at like 4 or 5 different colors, how do you have complementary colors? You should look at Color Brewer. Color Scheme Designer is kind of really cool. So if you actually back up a bit, the reason we use silver and blue in Pulse is actually also you know, something that we stumbled upon. So you can get a lot of inspiration from around you. We were looking at this stereo system which was silver, like sparkling, and it had that, you know, that LED display was in like blue, and we were inspired from that to do that. But Color Scheme Designer is kind of interesting where you can say, hey, here's the color I used. What is the second color I should be using as kind of a complementary thing? So I would definitely recommend going to these and some of the other websites you can find, and just kind of think about how you can improve that. You know, the color you're picking, the design, the typography, all those small things actually make a huge difference. And if you can't do that, like get someone, even if it's $100 an hour, it will be the best $1,000 investment in your product. So do that. And then the last step, I would say, like, you know, everybody would like to change the world and become a billionaire, but have a big dream, but take small steps. on how to get there, right? So we wanted to make a news reading application that works with all news, and you can pull in everything and you can do everything. But we started very small. The initial app that we created was only 4 technology blogs. We just wanted to get the interaction right. So we did technology 4 blogs, and we said, okay, let's expand it to all technology news. All the different sources can we pull in? And then we said, okay, let's do it for all world news. Can we pull in everything? And now we're at a stage where Pulse is a platform for any kind of information, right? RSS feeds is only one piece of the puzzle, but as you'll see, like we're implementing a lot of different information streams that come inside Pulse. And so think about, what's your end goal, but take it in small steps. Like what is my 6-month goal, my 3-month goal, and my 2-week goal, and take it in steps to go there. And on that note, these are the 10 hacks, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have. So I'll open it up. Thank you. So the question was, in 6 weeks, how did we ramp up on the technical side and actually learn Objective-C and work around that? And I'll give it to Ankit, who did most of the coding.
It's a pretty good question. But the awesome thing is you don't need to know much. Like everything's out there. I didn't have any formal training in Objective-C, just did a few apps on the App Store. And every time you implement something in an app, it's always new because it's something different. So even now I'm implementing new stuff and learning every day. So you don't need to do much to kind of build an app that users really like.
Yeah, there's a lot of you can think about when you're thinking of an idea, what's your minimal essential product you can make, and keep it very simple and build on top of that. And whether it's a design thing or whether it's a technology thing, there's so much stuff you can learn because there's so much things you can do, but break it up into small pieces that you can learn quickly. Go for it.
How did you decide how much to charge?
So that was part of the question was how did we decide what are we charging, which we were at $4 for majority of the time, and now we're at $2. I think it's 2 things you can look at it, right? Like you have to look at the competitive space and look at what are apps charging right now and how much sales they're seeing. One of the things that happened in the iPad was that increasingly, iPhone is dominated by games, but when iPad released, news was actually a pretty hot category, and it still is actually. But it was a great consumption device, and people were reading a lot of news, and so we saw a lot of news apps which made it to the top 10, and they were charging $3 to $5. To take it from the other side, figure out how much people are willing to pay, right? It's a pretty simple exercise to take your app out there and say, here's my app, test it out, and then your last question could be, how much would you pay for it? And we went from people saying, even if somebody paid me, I wouldn't buy it, I wouldn't take it, to going like people saying, okay, I'll pay $5 for it. And when you're ready to release, you'll get there. So, sure. So the question was, did we outsource our Android development? And I will say, thankfully not. It's great to have your developers on board. And actually, our Android developer is here, Albert. He was also a master's student, and we worked a lot together. And so he leads our Android platform. Recommendations on Dschool classes. Do you have any?
I mean, if you want to start a business, definitely take Launchpad. It's a must-take class. And all of the Dschool classes are very good to kind of learn the similar skills. So any Dschool class is the best Dschool class you can take.
Yeah, they have information sessions. The ones I took was, I took the boot camp, I took extreme affordability, and I took Launchpad. And I really enjoyed all 3 of them.
Besides getting good press, what were your marketing strategies for Pulse?
I think the question was, what were our marketing strategies besides getting press? And I will say something, and I'll pass it on Ankit if you have more thoughts, but word of mouth. You just have to build something that people like. We have spent $0 on getting a press agent or advertising or trying paid downloads. $0. We haven't spent a single dollar. We don't have a marketing person. Build something that people like. Build something that's viral. If somebody looks at Pulse, it intrigues them, right? It feels like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I want that. And you have to build something that gets to that stage.
The only thing I would add is our best marketing strategy was people were actually using Pulse to show off their iPads. So like if someone asks them, what does the iPad do? It's like, oh, check this out. And that helped it tremendously.
Yeah. And I think timing is a big piece. I think we were fortunate to get into the platform quickly and get into a time where people are thinking a lot about news and thinking a lot about consumption, and the whole space is kind of revived a little bit, and there's a lot of articles about publishing industry and how journalism is going to evolve, and so I think timing also helped us a lot. I think so we were lucky to a big extent. Yeah. So I think the question was, Steve Jobs mentioned Pulse as one of the premier apps when he did the iPhone 4 launch. Did that help us, and did that in some ways prevent us from having any marketing strategies? And it's a huge bump. I mean, it's a huge bump financially and actually in the terms of number of downloads you get, but it's a huge bump for your own, Steve Jobs is someone I think most of us look up as our idol and someone, who's just killing it. And having your guru tell you that he likes a product, and he probably has a list of products in one page that he likes, is huge in terms of confidence that you get, right? And doing it while you're still in college, about to graduate tomorrow, is huge, right? So that helped a lot, and I think it was a huge bump, in terms of the number of downloads, it skyrockets and it stays there for a bit. But I think to go back to the point, unless you're iterating and improving the product, you can become a one-app wonder where you have this huge rise and you make a lot of money and hundreds of thousands of dollars you've made, and now you don't have a business. And so thinking about how you can go from an app to a business is not something that Steve Jobs can do for you, right? So you have to, if you look at our history, we've updated Pulse every 3 weeks. And that's one of our bonus hacks that we can share with you is, Doodle Jump does this really, really well. They just update small incremental things where, they update their app every 3-4 weeks. Small things they add here and there. It engages users. It brings them back to the app. It creates this buzz. And what we've done is we've released the app and increased features or improved performance every 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And that's, you kind of see another rise when you update, and then it kind of takes you to a higher trajectory. So build an awesome product. That's all I can say.
Where do you see your business going in the next few years? Are you building more apps?
Sure. So the question was, where do we see our business going? Are we building more apps? And that was the first plan, was okay, we're going to make a bunch of apps and hopefully one of them will succeed. Now we've gotten to a really interesting stage where Pulse itself has gone so big, and we're 6 full-time people and 2 interns all working on Pulse across different devices. And the way we see it is Pulse is a platform for you to consume news and information across all mobile devices. And we want the experience to be extremely unified and extremely fluid. And so if you're reading your news in a cafe on your iPad, and suddenly you go back to your office, or you're on your commuter train, you're going to work, you can flip over your iPhone and you can read your news right there with the same kind of experience. And so we want to become the platform where you go in and all your news, whether it's small blogs, big newspapers, information from your Facebook, Twitter, all comes back to this small platform that we've built. Repeat.
So the question is, what kinds of data streams are we using, and how are we building the app out to deal with all the data streams?
Yeah, and what kind of other stuff you can do too.
Okay, so follow on as to what kinds of data streams we'll use in the future. I think data is everywhere. News earlier was just New York Times, you flip over and read a newspaper. But now it could be, something's happening in Israel, or someone's standing for an election, or someone's posted something on Twitter. So we're essentially thinking about data not in terms of not in terms of data streams, but in general information that you have in the world. And we're building a platform where we can use any kind of information and plug it in to our platform very easily. And so that just doesn't restrict it to a Facebook stream or a Twitter feed or an RSS feed, but it's any kind of information that could potentially be available out there. And I think, we just started months back. So we're kind of iterating on this idea and on this hypothesis. But things are going to get much more interesting as we go along.
That's all.
Cool.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.